The crystalline spires of the Starweave Palace pierced the lavender sky of Celestis Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons in an eternal dance of illumination. Within the grand hall, Princess Solara stood before her father, Emperor Draken, her luminescent skin pulsing with barely contained fury. "I refuse to entertain this absurd proposal." Solara's voice echoed through the chamber, causing the bioluminescent flowers adorning the walls to flicker in response to her emotional state. A marriage alliance with Earth? They're barely a century into space travel. Emperor Draken's silver eyes narrowed, his elongated fingers drumming against the arm of his living throne, a masterpiece of organic technology that seemed to breathe with his every movement. The humans have proven themselves to be remarkably adaptable and resourceful. Their military achievements in the Orion conflict prove that. Their achievements? Solara scoffed, her iridescent hair shimmering with shades of crimson, a clear sign of her agitation. "You mean their brutality? The way they turned the tide by introducing tactical innovations that no civilized species would even consider?" The Emperor rose, his ceremonial robes flowing like liquid starlight. "Those very innovations saved 12 worlds from the swarm, daughter. Including 3 of our major colonies." Before Solara could respond, the grand doors parted, revealing Ambassador James Harrison of Earth. He strode into the chamber with the confident bearing of a diplomat well-versed in alien customs, though his simple blue uniform stood in stark contrast to the organic splendor of the Starweave court. "Your Imperial Majesty," James bowed with perfect precision, not too deep to suggest submission, not too shallow to show disrespect. "Your Highness," he acknowledged Solara with a gentle nod. Solara's skin flickered with patterns of disdain. To human eyes, it might have appeared beautiful, like Aurora Borealis dancing across her form. To her own people, it was the equivalent of rolling her eyes. "Ambassador Harrison," Emperor Draken's voice carried the weight of centuries of rule. "We were just discussing the proposed alliance." "Indeed," James replied, his green eyes meeting Solara's silver ones without flinching. "Though I sense some reservations from Her Highness." "Reservations?" Solara moved closer, her natural bioluminescence brightening with challenge. "Ambassador, your species still fights wars among themselves over resources that could be easily synthesized with technology we considered primitive a millennium ago." James's smile remained diplomatic, but a spark of steel entered his eyes. "True, Your Highness. We are young, imperfect, and still learning. But perhaps that's exactly why we've achieved so much in so little time. Necessity, as we say on Earth, is the mother of invention." "And violence is your favorite child," Solara retorted. "Peace," Emperor Draken interrupted, "is precisely why we are here. The galaxy grows more dangerous by the day. The void hegemony expands its borders. The machine collective assimilates new worlds. Even the ancient swarm shows signs of stirring again. Which is why we need allies who understand strategy and innovation," James added, "not just those with advanced technology." Solara was about to deliver another scathing reply when the palace's warning systems suddenly blared to life. The bioluminescent flowers turned blood red, their petals trembling with alarm. "Imperial Guard to the Grand Hall." A voice thundered through the organic communications network. "Multiple unauthorized vessels have breached our atmospheric defense grid." James's hand instantly moved to the strange device at his hip, a weapon, Solara realized with distaste. Yet she couldn't help but notice how his first step was to move closer to her father, positioning himself between the Emperor and the doors. "Our shields are the most advanced in the sector," Solara said, though uncertainty crept into her voice. "Nothing could breach them unless they had help from within," James finished grimly, drawing his weapon as the first explosions rocked the palace foundations. Emperor Draken's throne pulsed with emergency protocols. "The palace defenses are not responding to commands. We've been compromised at the highest levels." As if to confirm his words, the grand doors burst open again, this time revealing not guards, but heavily armed figures in stealth suits that seemed to bend light around them. Their weapons were a horrifying hybrid of organic and mechanical technology. "The Void Hegemony sends its regards," the leader's synthesized voice announced as they raised their weapons. In that moment, Solara realized that her concerns about human brutality might soon become their only hope for survival. Time seemed to slow as the Void Hegemony assassins opened fire. The air filled with streams of dark energy that corroded everything they touched, eating through the living architecture of the palace like acid through paper. James Harrison moved with unexpected speed, tackling both Solara and Emperor Draken behind a massive crystalline column. "Barbaric," Solara hissed, but her contempt was tinged with fear as she watched the assassin's weapons dissolve a priceless ancient tapestry into nothingness. "Those are prohibited weapons, they break down organic matter at the molecular level." "Then let's respond with something inorganic," James replied, pulling a second device from his belt. With a quick twist, it expanded into what looked like a metallic sphere. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, close your eyes." Before Solara could object, James threw the sphere. It erupted in a blast of pure electromagnetic energy that made her skin tingle uncomfortably. The assassin's stealth suits flickered and failed, revealing their true forms, cybernetically enhanced beings with void-black skin that seemed to absorb light itself. "Imperial Guard." Solara called out through her natural biolink, but received only static in response. "They've blocked our communications." "Then we do this the old-fashioned way," James said, his weapon humming to life with a distinctive energy signature Solara had never encountered before. "Your Highness, I assume you have some form of self-defense training?" "I am a princess of the Starweave Empire," she replied indignantly, her skin shifting to reveal patterns that channeled her body's natural energy into defensive configurations. "We are not helpless decorations." The assassins regrouped, their leader stepping forward. "The age of organic life is ending. The Void Hegemony offers transcendence through cybernetic evolution. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." Emperor Draken stood tall, his ceremonial robes now reconfiguring into armor. "The Starweave Empire does not surrender to terrorists and butchers." "As you wish." The assassin leader raised their hand, and dark energy began to coalesce around their fingers. James fired first. His weapon released not the expected plasma or laser burst, but a concentrated pulse of something that looked like liquid lightning. It struck the leader's cybernetic enhancements and caused them to short-circuit spectacularly. Solara found herself fighting back-to-back with the human ambassador, her natural energy abilities complementing his technological weapons in ways she would never have expected. Where James's shots disabled their cybernetic components, Solara's energy pulses disrupted their biological systems. "Behind you!" James called out, and Solara ducked just as he fired over her head, taking down an assassin who had tried to flank her. The move brought them close together, and for a moment, she caught the scent of something unexpectedly pleasant, like earth rain, she would later learn. "The vault!" Emperor Draken shouted suddenly. "They're not here for us, this is a diversion." Understanding dawned on Solara's face. "The ancestral core. If they get their hands on our biotechnology database, they could corrupt it with their void tech," James finished. "Creating weapons that could target specific species." Two more assassins burst through the ceiling, rappelling down on cables that seemed to be made of solidified darkness. James's weapon clicked empty, and Solara's energy reserves were running dangerously low. "The vault is 3 levels down," Solara said, her skin patterns shifting to show her exhaustion. "We'll never make it through the corridors in time." James's eyes scanned the room rapidly, analyzing angles and possibilities with trained precision. "Who said anything about corridors?" He grabbed Solara's hand, causing her to flinch at the unexpected contact. "Your Majesty, I apologize in advance for this very undiplomatic suggestion, but, do your people trust in gravity?" Emperor Draken's eyes widened as he understood the human's plan. "The central shaft. But the defense systems. are already compromised, James pointed out. Sometimes the direct approach is the best one. Solara looked at the human's hand still holding hers, then at the determined expression on his face. For the first time, she saw not a primitive warrior, but someone willing to risk everything to protect her people's legacy. "Father," she asked, seeking permission not just for this desperate plan, but for something larger she wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. "Go," Emperor Draken commanded. "I will hold them here with the guard." As if summoned by his words, a squad of Imperial guards finally broke through to the chamber, their organic armor glowing with combat readiness. James pulled another device from his seemingly endless supply of surprises. "Ever been skydiving, Your Highness?" "I don't even know what that means," Solara replied, but found herself tightening her grip on his hand anyway. "Then this should be educational," James said with a grim smile, and pulled her toward the central shaft of the palace, a massive open core that ran the entire height of the structure. Sometimes the best way to save a civilization is to take a leap of faith. As they jumped into the void together, Solara realized that perhaps there was more to human innovation than mere brutality after all. The wind howled around them as they plummeted down the central shaft of the Starweave Palace. Solara's bioluminescence created a trail of light behind them, while James's grappling device whirred as it controlled their descent. The vast space around them was a marvel of organic architecture, with support structures that looked like crystalline veins pulsing with energy. "The vault entrance is coming up fast," Solara shouted over the rush of air. "But the security systems?" "Already on it," James replied, pulling yet another device from his uniform with his free hand. "Your Highness, I need you to trust me for about 30 more seconds." "I already jumped down 1,000-meter shaft with you," she retorted. "What's a little more trust?" James actually smiled at that, even as he typed commands into his device one-handed. "Remember how you mentioned that humans are barbaric because we still use primitive technology? Well, sometimes primitive is exactly what you need." The vault entrance approached rapidly, a massive door of living metal that responded only to authorized biopatterns. But as they neared it, James's device emitted a series of signals that made Solara's skin tingle uncomfortably. "What are you doing?" she demanded, watching as the door's organic circuits began to flutter erratically. "Creating electromagnetic interference at exactly the right frequency to, there." The door spasmed and partially opened, creating just enough space for them to slip through. James adjusted their trajectory with expert precision, and they shot through the gap moments before it sealed behind them. They landed in the antechamber of the vault, James absorbing most of the impact as they rolled to a stop. For a moment, they lay there catching their breath, and Solara found herself acutely aware of how close they were. "We need to move," James said, helping her up. "Your father can't hold them forever." The vault itself was a massive chamber filled with crystalline structures that contained the accumulated biotechnology knowledge of the Starweave Empire, millions of years of evolution and innovation stored in living memory banks. "Something's wrong," Solara said as they approached the central console. Her skin patterns shifted to show deep concern. "The security logs, there's been activity here." "Recent activity." James moved to her side, studying the alien displays. "Can you tell what they accessed?" "This can't be right," Solara's voice trembled slightly. "They accessed files dating back to the first evolution, genetic templates from before my people achieved spaceflight. But the access codes, they're royal codes." "An inside job," James said grimly. "The Void Hegemony has allies in your court." Before Solara could respond, a new voice echoed through the chamber. "Very perceptive, Ambassador Harrison." They spun to see Grand Advisor Nexus emerge from behind a crystal pillar, his usually pristine robes now marked with circuitry-like patterns that pulsed with void energy. Behind him, more assassins materialized from the shadows. "Uncle." Solara's skin paled to an almost translucent shade. "You. But why?" "Progress, my dear niece," Nexus replied, his voice distorting slightly as cybernetic enhancements became visible beneath his skin. Our empire has grown stagnant, clinging to purely organic evolution when we could be so much more. The void hegemony offers true transcendence, the perfect fusion of organic and mechanical. You mean corruption, Solara spat. You would destroy everything we are. I would elevate us. Nexus countered. Look at the humans, barely out of their cradle, yet they've achieved so much by embracing both organic and mechanical solutions. But they lack our biotechnology. Combined with void tech. His eyes gleamed with fanatical light. You're talking about weapons, James said quietly. Weapons that could target specific species. We're talking about evolution. Nexus spread his arms, and his robes fell away completely, revealing a body heavily modified with void tech. Imagine it, the power to rewrite the genetic code of entire species. Those who resist change will simply be reformed. Solara stepped forward, her royal authority evident in every movement. You speak of genocide, uncle. Of destroying everything that makes us who we are. I speak of necessity, Nexus replied. The galaxy changes. The machine collective grows. The swarm stirs. We must evolve or die. There's a difference between evolution and extinction, James said, subtly shifting his position to cover more angles. What you're proposing isn't progress, it's surrender to fear. Nexus laughed, the sound distorted by his cybernetic enhancements. Bold words from a primitive species. But you're too late. The data transfer is already complete. The void hegemony has everything they need to begin the Great Reformation. Solara's hands clenched into fists, her skin blazing with patterns of rage and betrayal. Then why are you still here, uncle? To tie up loose ends, of course, Nexus replied. The Emperor's stubborn adherence to tradition makes him a liability. Once he's gone, the people will need a strong leader to guide them through the coming changes. You mean a puppet for the void hegemony, James said. Uncle, Solara's voice was soft but carried iron beneath it. You taught me everything I know about our history, our traditions. You used to tell me stories about the first evolution, about how our ancestors chose wisdom over power. Was that all a lie? For just a moment, something flickered in Nexus's eyes, a hint of the mentor and uncle he had once been. But then the void tech pulsed, and his expression hardened. The time for stories is over, niece. Now, you have a choice, embrace the future I offer, or die with the past. Solara and James stood side by side in the vault chamber, facing down Grand Advisor Nexus and his void-enhanced soldiers. The air crackled with tension as bioluminescent lights pulsed urgently around them. You've already lost, uncle, Solara said, her voice steady despite the betrayal burning in her heart. Even if you kill us, you'll never succeed in corrupting our people. My dear niece, Nexus's cybernetic implants glowed with dark energy, you still don't understand. The corruption, as you call it, has already begun. Even now, void tech spreads through our orbital defense network. Soon, every piece of our biotechnology will be transformed. James's hand brushed against Solara's, a subtle gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through her luminescent skin. Your Highness, he whispered, remember what you said about human brutality? Well, sometimes brutality has its uses. Understanding flickered in her eyes as she realized what he meant. The vault's defense systems might be compromised, but they still had one weapon that Nexus couldn't possibly have prepared for, primitive human ingenuity. Uncle, Solara stepped forward, her royal bearing more pronounced than ever, you taught me that our greatest strength lies not in our technology, but in our ability to adapt. To evolve. Her skin began to pulse with complex patterns, a display that drew all eyes to her. Perhaps it's time I showed you what I've learned. In that moment of distraction, James activated his last electromagnetic pulse device, not against Nexus and his soldiers, but against the vault's crystalline walls themselves. The pulse interfered with the living crystal's natural resonance, creating a cascade effect that rippled through the entire chamber. Nexus laughed. a primitive attack against our most advanced. But Solara was already moving, her body channeling natural energy in ways that hadn't been seen since the first evolution. She had always been gifted in bioharmonics, able to communicate with the living architecture of their civilization. Now, she used that gift not to control, but to release. The vault's crystals began to sing. The sound started low, barely perceptible, but quickly rose to a frequency that made Nexus's void tech implants shriek in protest. The hybridized technology that he had so proudly embraced now became his prison, the conflicting resonances threatening to tear his enhanced body apart. "What have you done?" he screamed, his soldiers collapsing around him as their own implants rebelled. "Reminded our technology what it means to be alive," Solara answered, her skin glowing with effort as she maintained the harmonic cascade. Something the void hegemony could never understand. James moved swiftly through the chaos, disabling the fallen soldiers with precise shots from his weapon. "Your Highness, we need to end this quickly. The frequency will affect the entire palace if we don't contain it. Then help me, Ambassador," she reached out her hand. "Show me that humanity's strength isn't just in its weapons." Without hesitation, James took her hand. His presence grounded her, his simpler biology providing a template that helped her focus the resonance. Together, they created a harmony between organic and mechanical, between evolution and innovation, that sang through the vault's crystals. Nexus fell to his knees, void tech failing throughout his body. "You would choose them?" he gasped, looking at his niece with genuine incomprehension. "These primitives?" "No, Uncle," Solara's voice was gentle even as she maintained the resonance. "I choose both. The wisdom to preserve what makes us unique, and the courage to embrace new possibilities." The harmonic cascade reached its peak, and with a sound like shattering glass, every piece of void tech in the chamber failed simultaneously. Nexus and his soldiers collapsed, their hybrid systems offline but their organic bodies preserved. As the resonance faded, Emperor Draken burst into the vault with the Imperial Guard, having finally fought their way through the palace's compromised defenses. They found Solara and James still standing together, surrounded by disabled assassins and corrupted crystals that were already beginning to heal themselves. "The void hegemony will not forget this defeat," James said quietly to Solara as the guards secured the prisoners. "Good," she replied, her skin patterns showing not anger now, but determination. "Let them remember that true evolution comes not from forcing change, but from finding harmony between different ways of being." She turned to face him fully. "I may have been wrong about humans, Ambassador. Your people's primitive approach to problems, it has its merits." James smiled. "And I may have underestimated the power of tradition, Your Highness. Perhaps there's something to be said for taking the time to understand the deeper harmonies of the universe." Emperor Draken approached them, his royal presence somehow both softened and strengthened by the day's events. "It seems, daughter, that your protest against marrying a human may have been somewhat premature." Solara's skin flushed with patterns that made James think of starlight on water. "Perhaps, father. Though if we're to discuss alliances, I believe I'd prefer to begin with diplomatic dinner rather than wedding plans." "I would be honored, Your Highness," James bowed slightly, his diplomatic polish failing to hide a very human warmth in his eyes. As they left the vault together, the living crystals of the Starweave Palace sang with renewed vigor, their harmonies enriched by the discovery that sometimes the greatest evolution comes not from changing who you are, but from learning to see the strength in differences.